He watched her from the corner booth of the Golden Elm, the rain glinting against the glass like liquid diamonds. She was just a waitress to him, another nameless face serving power and wine. But tonight, arrogance mixed with whiskey, and something darker stirred inside Charles Whitman, the man who once thought he owned the city's light. When Emma Lewis leaned forward to pour his drink, his hand moved, slow, deliberate, and wrong. The laughter around the table froze. Even the chandelier seemed to hold its breath. She stepped back, eyes wide with shock, while he smirked, too drunk on his own power to notice the line he had crossed. He thought it was just another night, another woman too afraid to speak. But that moment, one cruel touch, one heartbeat of silence, would ignite a storm that no fortune, no lawyer, no empire could contain. Because sometimes, even in the darkest corner of a city built on power, God sends a protector with 4 paws and a heart that never forgets. The night over San Francisco shimmered with mist and glass. From the 12th floor of the Golden Elm, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, the skyline glowed like molten silver beneath chandeliers that hummed softly above crystal tables. The air carried the faint perfume of truffle oil, money, and ambition. Emma Lewis, 26, moved between tables like a soft breeze in human form. She was tall and slender, with chestnut brown hair tied in a neat bun, a few strands escaping to frame her pale oval face. Her eyes, gray with a hint of green, were calm yet distant, the eyes of someone who had learned to hide storms behind politeness. Life had not offered her luxury. Her mother's illness had forced Emma to quit college early, and years of double shifts had carved quiet endurance into her bones. At the far end of the dining hall sat Charles Whitman, 53, CEO of Whitman Energy Group, a titan of the nation's power industry. He was a man built of sharp edges, square jaw, salt and pepper hair, meticulously styled, and the kind of tailored suit that whispered arrogance. His once handsome face carried the fatigue of a man who believed the world owed him reverence. He'd built empires out of electricity, but in his heart, ever since the death of his wife 8 years ago, there was only static, a constant hum of dissatisfaction that no amount of scotch could drown. Tonight, that hum had grown louder. A corporate celebration for $1 billion merger had descended into laughter, thick with alcohol. Charles's cheeks were flushed, his slate blue eyes glassy. When Emma approached to refill his glass, he smirked. A slow, dangerous curve. "Beautiful night, isn't it?" he said, voice heavy with liquor and entitlement. "Yes, sir," Emma replied, her tone even, the way she'd been trained. As she leaned forward, he placed a hand on her waist. At first, it might have been brushed off as clumsy drunkenness, but his fingers lingered, pressed, and slid lower. Emma froze. The bottle trembled in her hand. Red wine spilled across the pristine tablecloth like blood blooming in snow. The room's chatter dimmed, replaced by the faint clink of glass. "Sir, please," she whispered. Charles chuckled, leaning closer. "Relax, sweetheart. You're too pretty to frown." Something shattered, not just the glass, but the fragile shell of composure she'd worn all evening. She stepped back, heart pounding in her chest, the heat of humiliation rising up her neck. Her voice cracked, but found its strength. "Don't touch me." The nearby guests turned their heads. Charles withdrew his hand slowly, his smirk faltering for the briefest moment before pride masked it again. "It was a joke," he muttered, waving her off, as if brushing away a fly. Emma fled to the service hallway. There, beneath the soft buzz of a fluorescent bulb, she pressed her back to the wall and slid down until her knees touched the cold tile. Her breath came in sharp bursts. The echo of his laughter still filled her ears. For a long moment, she said nothing. The world of the rich went on spinning beyond the wall. Music, wine, applause. But inside her chest, something had cracked open. Not just fear, anger, hot and trembling, the kind that demanded to be seen. That night, she walked home through fog and neon. Her apartment was small, tucked behind a laundromat in the Mission District. When she opened the door, a blur of motion greeted her. Rex, her 6-year-old German shepherd, strong and broad-shouldered, with a black and tan coat that gleamed even in Draken light. His amber eyes carried the calm wisdom of a loyal guardian. Emma knelt beside him, fingers tangling in his fur. The dam broke. They can do that, Rex. And no one stops them. No one cares. Rex pressed his muzzle to her palm, warm breath steady against her skin. His ears flicked forward, alert but gentle. He didn't bark, didn't move, just stayed. Emma leaned into him, eyes closing. The city outside buzzed with electric light. But in that quiet apartment, only one truth mattered. She wasn't alone. Somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the pain, a spark stirred. A small, stubborn flame that refused to die. Morning sunlight crawled reluctantly across the skyline of San Francisco, washing the steel towers in a pale gold haze. Inside the golden elm, whispers traveled faster than the espresso machines. Servers leaned close over silver trays. The air was thick with rumor. Did you hear? Charles Whitman crossed the line last night. No, impossible. He's untouchable. Emma Lewis could feel those murmurs clinging to her every step when she entered to collect her paycheck. Eyes flickered toward her, some pitying, others cautious, as though fear itself had taken human form and clocked in for a shift. The manager, Richard Hanley, a thin man in his 40s, with a receding hairline and nervous hands that smelled faintly of sanitizer, called her into his office. Richard was a man who'd once dreamed of being a jazz pianist, but settled for managing schedules and smoothing scandals. His loyalty bent toward whoever signed the checks. "Emma," he said, voice low, "I know what happened was unpleasant, but Whitman is an important client. If you go public, you'll destroy your career. Think carefully, okay?" His eyes darted to the surveillance camera in the corner, then back to her, like he was afraid even the walls might testify. Emma's jaw tightened. She thanked him, took her pay envelope, and left without another word. Outside, the morning breeze smelled of salt and rain. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number she'd saved months ago from a late-night news article. Laura Bennett, an independent investigative journalist known for exposing corporate misconduct. Laura answered after the second ring. Her voice was smooth, grounded, with the tired calm of someone who'd seen too much of the world's ugliness. "This is Laura." "Ms. Bennett, my name's Emma Lewis. I work at the Golden Elm. Something happened." There was silence on the line. Then, softly, "Take a deep breath. Tell me everything." By the time Emma finished, her hands were trembling. Laura didn't interrupt, didn't rush. She simply listened. When Emma's voice finally broke, Laura said, "Do you have evidence?" "Just memory. And Rex." Later that afternoon, Laura appeared at Emma's door. She was in her mid-30s, tall and composed, with dark auburn hair pulled into a practical ponytail, and freckles dusted across pale skin that had known too much sunlight chasing stories. Her eyes, steel gray, radiated intelligence and empathy. "I wanted to meet you, face to face," she said. Rex stood beside Emma, tail low but alert. When Laura mentioned Whitman's name, Rex's hackles rose slightly, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Laura knelt and extended a cautious hand. "Smart dog," she murmured. He remembers. They talked for hours over black coffee in chipped mugs. Laura scribbled notes in a worn leather notebook, her handwriting sharp and precise. Your story deserves to be heard, she said at last. But going public means they'll come after you, hard. They'll twist everything. Emma stared at her reflection in the window, faint and fragile against the city lights. They already took my peace, she said quietly. They can't take my voice. Meanwhile, across town, Charles Whitman sat in his penthouse office overlooking the bay. His assistant, Megan Clark, a brisk woman with platinum hair and sharp heels, stood by as he barked into his phone. Find out who she's talking to. I want names, addresses, everything. Charles's face was pale beneath the flush of anger. His jaw flexed, his knuckles white against the mahogany desk. He was used to controlling narratives, to buying silence. But something in Emma's defiance gnawed at him like static in a power line, persistent and irritating. She wants money, he hissed. They all do. Megan hesitated. And if she doesn't? Charles looked up, his expression hard as glass. Then she'll learn the cost of crossing me. That night, Emma sat with Rex, curled beside her, his steady breathing grounding her in a world that suddenly felt hostile and vast. She opened her laptop and began typing a statement. Her hands trembled, but her resolve did not. Every word she wrote was a small rebellion against the silence that had protected men like Charles for too long. When she finished, she looked down at Rex. We're going to fight this, boy, she whispered. He lifted his head, amber eyes glowing in the dim lamplight. If loyalty had a face, it was his. And though fear still lingered in her chest, something else had begun to grow. Something steady, radiant, and dangerous to the powerful. Courage. The city had turned restless. San Francisco's winter rain came in sheets, streaking down windows like veins of silver. Inside Emma's apartment, the television hummed with static before flashing the headline, Waitress and her dog challenge energy tycoon. The accompanying photo, Emma hugging Rex by the window, had gone viral overnight. The shot, captured by Laura Bennett, looked almost poetic. A young woman, eyes weary but determined, her loyal German shepherd beside her, both staring into the storm as if daring it to come closer. Emma didn't know whether to cry or hide. The article praised her courage, but the comment sections beneath were a battlefield. Some voices calling her brave, others calling her a liar, seeking fame. Fame was a thing she never wanted. All she had wanted was dignity. Yet dignity, she thought, was the one luxury the world rarely offered women like her. At Whitman Tower, Charles Whitman watched the same broadcast. The glare of the screen reflected off his whiskey glass, distorting his own face into something monstrous. His temper simmered beneath the calm surface of practiced arrogance. He summoned Mark Doyle, his private investigator, a thick-set man in his late 40s with a grizzled beard, small eyes that darted like a crow's, and a trench coat perpetually smelling of cigarette ash. Doyle was a man who had long ago traded conscience for contracts. "Find me everything on her," Whitman ordered. "I don't care how far you dig." Doyle gave a curt nod. "Understood, sir." By nightfall, Doyle returned with a folder. Inside were not scandals, but small, heartbreaking details: hospital bills, blood donation receipts, veterinary invoices. "She sold her blood to save that dog," Doyle muttered, tapping the page. Charles frowned. "What?" "Yeah. Dog had pneumonia 2 years ago. The vet wouldn't treat him until she paid up front. She did." For the first time in years, something in Charles's chest stirred. A tiny, unwelcome pang of guilt. But he drowned it with another drink. "That's not newsworthy," he said coldly. "Find something else." Across town, Laura's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. News agencies wanted interviews. Advocacy groups wanted partnerships. She refused them all, focusing only on Emma's safety. When she arrived that evening, the rain had turned into a violent drumbeat against the door. Emma greeted her with tired eyes, Rex's tail thumping softly in recognition. "You're everywhere," Laura said gently. "You've become a symbol." "I didn't ask to be one," Emma murmured. They didn't notice the faint scrape near the lock until Rex's ears twitched. The next second, his body stiffened, muscles coiling like a spring. "Rex," Emma whispered. A low growl vibrated from his chest. Then the door gave a soft click. Someone was inside. Before the intruder could take another step, Rex lunged, a blur of muscle and fury. The man cursed, stumbling backward, knocking over a chair as the dog's teeth tore through his sleeve. Emma screamed. Laura grabbed her phone, filming instinctively. The stranger broke free and bolted through the open door, vanishing into the rain. Left behind on the floor was a torn patch of fabric embroidered with a corporate insignia: Whitman Energy Security Division. Laura's hands shook as she hit record again. "You need to see this," she said, uploading the photo online. Within minutes, the post exploded. "Did Whitman hire men to intimidate her?" read one headline. Protesters flooded the company's social media pages, demanding answers. The tycoon who once powered cities now found his empire flickering under public outrage. Emma sank to her knees beside Rex, her breath ragged. She wrapped her arms around his damp fur, pressing her forehead against his. "You saved me again," she whispered, voice trembling between gratitude and disbelief. "But this time, I won't run. I'll fight." Rex's tail brushed the floor twice. A silent oath returned. Outside, thunder rolled over the bay, and in that sound, Emma heard something new. Not fear, not defeat, but the beginning of a reckoning. 3 months later, San Francisco's civic courthouse stood like a cathedral of glass and stone, its marble steps glistening under a pale winter sun. Crowds lined the entrance, reporters with cameras, protesters with signs that read, "Justice for Emma," and "No one is above the law." The world had been watching, and now the reckoning had arrived. Inside, the courtroom felt like a theater of power and nerves. Judge Eleanor McCaffrey, a woman in her late 50s, with sharp cheekbones, short silver hair, and an expression that could silence thunder, presided from the bench. Known for her no-nonsense fairness and quiet empathy, she had once been a prosecutor for victims of workplace assault. Experience that had carved both compassion and steel into her character. Emma Lewis sat at the plaintiff's table in a modest navy dress, her posture straight despite the tremor in her hands. Beside her, Rex lay calmly, his black and tan coat gleaming under the fluorescent lights. His ears flicked occasionally toward Emma's heartbeat, as if synchronized with her courage. On the opposite side sat Charles Whitman, the man whose wealth had once made him untouchable. Today, though, he looked smaller somehow. His immaculate gray suit couldn't conceal the exhaustion in his eyes or the faint tremor of his jaw. Beside him was Philip Garner, his lead attorney, a tall, lean man in his 40s, with slicked-back blonde hair and a reptilian smoothness in his voice. Garner had built a career defending corporations accused of wrongdoing, famous for turning victims into opportunists through his icy eloquence. He adjusted his tie and whispered to Charles, "Stay silent. Let me handle her." The session began. Garner rose, pacing with a predatory confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, "this is not about justice. This is about attention. Miss Lewis has leveraged an unfortunate misunderstanding into a spectacle. Viral fame, sympathy, interviews. She has gained far more than she ever lost." He smiled faintly, turning toward Emma. "And she brought her dog, too, for effect." The courtroom murmured. Emma's throat tightened, But before she could respond, Rex emitted a deep, low growl. Not loud, but resonant enough to slice through the tension. Every head turned. The judge raised an eyebrow, then smiled slightly. "Let the record show," Judge McCaffrey said, her tone dry, "that the dog appears to have excellent moral instincts. He may remain." Laughter rippled softly through the courtroom, easing the weight for a moment. When it was Emma's turn, her lawyer, Oliver Finch, a middle-aged man with kind brown eyes and a calm demeanor, guided her to the witness stand. Oliver was not flashy. His suits were always a bit rumpled, his voice steady rather than loud, but he had something most attorneys didn't: sincerity. Years earlier, he had lost his own sister to a similar case of workplace assault, a tragedy that had turned his quiet compassion into purpose. Emma took a deep breath, her voice trembling at first, but growing steadier with every word. She recounted the night at the Golden Elm, the laughter, the hand, the humiliation that followed. When the defense tried to interrupt, Judge McCaffrey raised her gavel. "Let her finish," she said firmly. Then came the moment of truth, the final piece of evidence, grainy surveillance footage from the restaurant, newly recovered from the system archives. It played on the large monitor, Charles leaning forward, the hand reaching, Emma's startled reaction, the spilled wine. Silence fell like snowfall. Even Arner's mask cracked. Charles bowed his head, shame finally seeping through the cracks of pride. He whispered something to Garner, who shook his head in disbelief. Emma's closing statement was simple, her eyes glistening, but clear. "I didn't come here to destroy anyone. I came here because silence protects the wrong people. I came here so no woman has to feel small for defending herself. And I came here to thank Rex for standing beside me when no one else did." As she sat down, Rex lifted his head, tail thumping once against the polished floor, as if confirming her words. The courtroom, usually rigid with formality, held its breath, then erupted into applause before the judge's gavel restored order. And for the first time, Charles Whitman's empire trembled, not from market losses, but from conscience. The morning air in San Francisco was crisp, gilded with light that filtered through the fog like forgiveness finding its way through pain. Outside the new Rex Foundation Center, a crowd had gathered, their murmurs weaving with the flutter of camera shutters and the scent of fresh lilies that lined the front steps. The building stood modestly on Mission Street, glass, brick, and hope bearing the engraved words above the door, "Protector of Dignity." Emma Lewis stood at the podium, a faint smile softening her features. The months of court hearings, interviews, and sleepless nights had left her thinner, but there was a new steadiness in her voice, the calm of someone who had faced her storm and survived it. She wore a simple white blouse and gray slacks, her chestnut hair falling loose around her shoulders for the first time since the trial. Beside her sat Rex, his fur gleaming in the morning sun, the new silver collar catching the light. His eyes were alert but peaceful, scanning the crowd as if ensuring the world was finally safe enough for her. In the front row, Laura Bennett leaned forward with her usual composed poise, her auburn hair catching the golden light. To her left was Oliver Finch, the lawyer whose quiet strength had carried the case through chaos. He now served as a legal advisor for the foundation. A few seats behind them sat Margaret Hale, a local philanthropist in her 60s, with elegant silver hair and eyes the color of sea glass. Known for her humanitarian work and calm authority, Margaret had been among the first to donate to the Rex Foundation. She believed, as she often said, healing begins where dignity is restored. As Emma took the microphone, the crowd fell silent. 3 months ago, she began, her voice steady, I walked into a courtroom terrified but determined. Today, I stand here free, not because the world suddenly became kinder, but because courage, once found, doesn't fade. It only grows. She looked down at Rex, who wagged his tail once, as if to agree. The Rex Foundation isn't just about me or my story. It's for every woman who's ever been told to stay quiet, every man who struggled to rebuild, and every creature, human or not, who's ever offered unconditional loyalty. A reporter, young and eager, stood up from the press section. He was David Kim, early 30s, Korean-American, clean-cut with dark, earnest eyes and a notepad perpetually in hand. Miss Lewis, he asked, after everything that's happened, do you forgive Charles Whitman? Cameras zoomed in, microphones tilted forward. Emma paused, taking a slow breath. Forgiveness, she said finally, doesn't mean forgetting. It means refusing to let them define who you are. I don't hate him. I just choose to live beyond what he did. The crowd broke into applause, gentle at first, then rising like a tide. Rex barked once, as though to punctuate the moment, earning a few laughs and tears. Across the city, inside a quiet apartment overlooking the bay, Charles Whitman watched the live broadcast on an old television. The once arrogant tycoon now wore simple clothes. His sharp jawline was shadowed by stubble, and his hair, once immaculately styled, had gone slightly unkempt. He lived alone now, having resigned from his company. The glittering skyline reflected in his glass of water, a humble drink for a humbled man. When Emma's words echoed through the speakers, his eyes softened. Refusing to let them define you, he whispered to himself. For the first time in years, his expression wasn't one of power or pride, but quiet regret. Back at the foundation, the ceremony closed with a symbolic act. Emma knelt beside Rex and placed her hand on the engraved plaque bearing his name. "He protected me," she said, "and now, through this, he'll protect others." The crowd rose to their feet, applause swelling beneath the pale sunlight. Somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed noon, their sound mingling with Rex's low, contented sigh. And in that harmony, metal and fur, justice and grace, the city seemed to breathe a little easier. It wasn't the end of a fight, but the beginning of something cleaner, quieter, and infinitely stronger. The dawn of justice. Sometimes, God's miracles don't come as thunder. They come as courage, loyalty, and love. Through Emma and Rex, we see that faith still lives in small acts of bravery and kindness. May God bless everyone watching. May He give you strength to stand for truth and protect what is pure. Share your thoughts, subscribe, and share this story so His light can reach more hearts. Miracles still happen. Sometimes they have 4 paws.